Story 1. In 2022, three of my friends committed suicide. My ex, who was my friend for almost 20 years before we became lovers, treated me poorly throughout our relationship. The first incident happened in February, and my friend's girlfriend had to move out. She insisted on cleaning the pool of blood, refusing to let it go. So I got on my hands and knees and scrubbed repeatedly. This young man looked up to me, and I left him at a vulnerable moment. I helped him find a job, gave him tools to get a car, and eventually secured the house we rented. My girlfriend at the time decided I wasn't worth the effort and cheated on me. I was too broken to question it and ended the relationship. A couple of months later, my friend shot himself in front of his own mother. The funeral was chaotic. Not even 2 weeks later, my best friend shot himself in his car in front of the whole group. Another close friend tried his best to apply pressure to the wound, but the damage was too severe. He was declared dead on arrival. The mental scars of 2022 will never fade. Story 2. 2022 was the year I lost my job, my marriage ended, and I attempted suicide. After surviving my attempt, I spent the rest of the year at my ex-wife's parents' house because my closest family lives on the other side of the United States, and I had nowhere else to go. I couldn't drive because I wasn't medically cleared, and my ex-wife had all of our vehicles. Since I wasn't cleared to return to work, I only went out for doctor appointments or family events I was invited to. Story 3. This year has been challenging. I was diagnosed with appendicitis on January 8th. 3 weeks later, my dog tore a tendon and required an expensive surgery, which forced us to cancel our wedding. Additionally, my work hours were reduced, and I discovered that my manager has a criminal history. Now, I need to undergo emergency surgery for a grape-sized hemorrhoid. This year has been difficult. Story 4. In 2020, the pandemic occurred, but I also lost my cat very suddenly, and I completely broke down for 7 months until I finally sought help. I am now a different person because of that experience. Story 5. I decided to go for a run 12 years ago. An intoxicated driver put me into an 11-and-a-half-day coma in the intensive care unit. I suffered a traumatic brain injury, a broken sternum, skull, and shoulder. I haven't been able to taste or smell anything for over 12 years. My short-term memory is poor, my balance is off, I can't dream, and I have impaired pain perception and tactile function. This incident significantly disrupted my life and caused new stress and heartache. During my recovery, I discovered music composition therapy. I dedicated many years to writing music since then. If you're interested, the album 9FM by the artist 9FM features the music I created during my recovery. It's available for streaming everywhere. The first song is titled A Deep Water. Story 6. Honestly, I think 2005 is the summer that changed my life irrevocably. I downplay my trauma a lot because it didn't happen to me. But I was 15 and had lived a very privileged and happy life. Good town, good schools. Really nothing bad happened. Then, in May, a kid from our school was hit by a drunk driver. It was a shock and very sad, but I didn't know him. It rattled my sense of security. 2 months later, my friend died. They eventually labeled it pneumonia, but I have my doubts. She was 15 and just died, which was an awful thing to experience. At that point, I had attended 3 funerals, all for great-grandparents, which were sad but expected. This was my first true experience with shock and grief. 2 weeks after that, a close friend was assaulted. While their trauma was much larger than mine, I was coming to terms with the realization that I could drop dead for no reason. I was now dealing with the knowledge that my bodily safety was no longer guaranteed. It was genuinely horrifying and scary. My dad even offered to have the assailant killed, which made me realize a lot about him that I'd never seen before. Throughout it all, I really didn't have the support I needed to get through those experiences. My parents didn't know how to handle any of this because they had also lived relatively easy lives. I've had perhaps more direct brushes with my own mortality, like car accidents that rocked me. But 2005 was the end of my childhood. Story 7. Ongoing. The last 15 years have been difficult. I hate to say it, but it's true. Hopefully, it won't always be this way. It just is right now and has been for that long. Story 8. Last year, I had a broken leg and underwent 3 operations. I also dealt with meningitis and encephalitis. I spent months off work as a self-employed person, losing workers and completing 3 major jobs that took months to get paid for. I nearly died and almost went bankrupt, but I survived. Although I'm still financially strained, I'm working on it, and life is getting better each day. I kept the house, but I have a traumatic brain injury to adjust to. Life can be tough, but I believe that adversity is a privilege. I take what comes my way, process it, and continue living. Story 9. In 2022, the year my relationship ended, I tied my identity to its outcome. This followed closely the loss of my father in 2006 after a long battle with cancer. Story 10. In 2019, I was 19 years old. I dropped out of college, dated the worst boyfriend I ever had, and experienced a million terrible jobs. Story 11. My grandfather, who raised me, died in 2021. My fiancée left me a few weeks ago. It is a tie between 2021 and 2025, as both events caused me to entirely upend my life and start from scratch. Story 12. In 2024, my close friend's husband was hit by a bus at age 32, and we watched him die in the hospital for a week. I became addicted to cocaine. To make matters worse, all my hair snapped off, and I couldn't look at myself in the mirror. It was supposed to be the best year since I bought my dream home, but instead, I felt insane, shameful, and guilty. This year, I have kicked the cocaine habit, my hair has grown back, and my best friend is doing really well, so I couldn't ask for more. I miss my friend, though. Story 13. In 2023, I had an amputated finger, colon cancer surgery, and open heart surgery. It was less enjoyable than it sounds. Story 14. I'm gonna go with year 1. My mom is a full-blown narcissist and drug user. I'm trying to figure everything out with only this person to look to for comfort. I messed everything else up after that. Story 15. I think it was either 2022 or 2023. I genuinely can't remember most of it due to brain fog from depression and a lot of drinking, but it's gotten better, thank God. Story 16. In 2002, my grandma died just before I turned 6. It still hurts to this day that she didn't get to see me grow up. Story 17. I have had a lot of difficult years, but in 2009, while I was in my last trimester of pregnancy with my second son, my dad experienced a psychotic break triggered by drugs, which my mom was also using. They both completely imploded, and I was too young to have developed strong enough boundaries, so their problems became mine. I ultimately took full responsibility for my disabled brother while our other brother was living out of state. I was in a bad marriage and facing a challenging situation alone with a toddler and a newborn. It was the most stressed I have ever been. Story 18. In 2022, I lost my aunt. The year before, I was already experiencing my first heartbreak. The way she died was overwhelming. She went in for a checkup and never came out. The doctors told us she could come home in an hour. So much for that, right? At that point, I realized that life only gets harder from here on out. Story 19. When I was 22, I went through a string of difficult relationships, some of which were violent. I lost my home, felt unhappy at work, and faced judgment from my family. I felt really down and alone. I didn't realize it at the time, but things were about to change. It was a challenging period, but it taught me a lot about the people in my life and who I needed to distance myself from. Story 20. Last year, I was recovering and healing from infidelity. The company was not doing well financially, so no one received bonuses or promotions. I underwent sinus surgery and had many doctor visits. Although I was not obese, my cholesterol levels were exceptionally high for my age. Overall, I was not feeling well. Story 21. 2022 was a year I lost myself. I was going through a conflict with my parents. What I was fighting for was important to me but seemed petty when I tried to explain it. As a coping mechanism, I started seeking approval elsewhere. I began to feel hatred, which is a strong emotion that I do not recommend. My priorities became jumbled and I failed my university year, the year I had to pass to graduate. Felt like I was losing in everything. I was so confused and defeated. My self-worth and confidence diminished. Now I doubt myself constantly, with little confidence in my instincts. My self-worth is very low in general. I am still recovering from it. This year has been much better. I have started to forgive myself, and my self-worth is improving. I know others have been through much worse, but in my life, 2022 has been the hardest year. Story 22. In 2017, I discovered that my daughter had been sexually assaulted by her uncle, who was living with us. I lost my job because I mishandled the situation with my child. My ex-wife left me and began dating multiple people while I was begging her to work on our marriage. I was willing to forgive everything she had done, only for 2018 to arrive with her lying to me and repeating her previous actions behind my back, just so she would not have to move out of the house. Those 2 years were incredibly difficult. Story 23. In 2007, I hit rock bottom. I had flunked out of college, reached a dead end at my job after being passed over for a deserved promotion, strained my relationships with my parents, battled alcoholism, and became reliant on painkillers after injuring my trapezius. I was trying to end a 7-year relationship that should have concluded much earlier. I even resorted to living in my truck for a short time and let depression lead me to self-harm and suicidal thoughts. Fortunately, I was one of the few who found a way to reset my life, and I completely turned it around within a year. By the end of 2010 and the beginning of 2011, I earned my bachelor's degree, was accepted into graduate school, repaired my relationship with my parents, overcame some bad habits, and moved on from that lengthy relationship. I got engaged to my now wife in 2012. Life is good these days, but I barely made it through 2007. Story 24. In 2010, I faced significant challenges. The first half of the year was difficult due to undiagnosed bipolar disorder. I was negatively impacting my career with petty conflicts and consuming excessive amounts of coffee. I was laid off in June, ending my 10-year tenure and all the effort I had put in. I took another job in Boston that lasted about 3 weeks and then started a night job to accommodate my sleeping patterns. Even my mother remarked that I looked terrible. This period culminated in a suicide attempt before things began to slowly improve. Story 25. I had my granddad die in 2015, my nan die in 2019, and my Chinese water dragon, Sammy, die in 2022. Story 26. In 2014, I was stuck in a job I disliked with a demanding supervisor. I worked 14 hours every day for 6 days a week. It was a difficult year, and I never want to experience it again. Story 27. I would say October 2023 to October 2024, by far. My mom was diagnosed with lymphoma in October 2023. My dad, who had been battling prostate cancer for 5 years, died in November. The preceding several months were incredibly challenging for my mom and me as her healthcare proxy. It was a roller coaster of good news and bad news, remission and relapse. It was a difficult year culminating in her death this past October. Last year has forever changed me, I think. Story 28. In 2005, I was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer at 15 years old. In May, they first found the tumor during a CT scan after I experienced nonstop heartburn. By July, they informed me it was cancerous. By mid-July, I had consulted a specialist who told me I was going to die or be left paralyzed and would likely die from blood loss. By September 1st, the first day of my sophomore year of high school, I was in the hospital. 32 hours later, the surgery finally ended, and I was still alive. 2.5 months later, I finally left the hospital. I was still able to walk but was left permanently disabled and in chronic pain. Story 29. 2017 was challenging. I had gallstones that resulted in pancreatitis, which was extremely painful and nearly fatal. I had my gallbladder removed a week later. Then my boyfriend cheated on me later that year, all while I was still adjusting to motherhood. It was a tough year. Story 30. In 2023, I faced various pressures that nearly led me to consider suicide, only to realize that the people I thought were friends were actually unsupportive and predatory. Story 31. In 1997, within the span of 3 months, I was hit by a car on my way to school. I suffered a concussion and severe head injuries, which left me unable to walk properly for almost a month. Shortly after, my grandfather was found dead at the age of 63. He had been a father figure to me for most of my life, as my biological father was abusive. Grief counseling was not available for children at that time, and I had no idea how to process my loss. This experience significantly altered my personality and disrupted my performance at school. I can likely trace my ongoing struggle with depression and anxiety back to that period. Story 32. In 2024, my partner became ill and was hospitalized for a month. I cared for him and visited as much as possible. I was 16, and this was my first relationship. During this time, he was diagnosed with autism. A friend abandoned me for my boyfriend's ex, who had made a false claim of sexual assault against him. My boyfriend unexpectedly ended our relationship over text and did not appreciate my defense of our relationship. All of this happened in the span of 3 months, which was very challenging. Story 33. 2023 stands out in recent memory. I left a stable job for what I thought was my dream job, but it turned out to be a toxic experience, and I was fired. I had a falling out with a friend and have not spoken to her since. I dated someone for a while and we really connected, but then she broke up with me. My dog went through a health scare and had to stay at the hospital overnight. I believe I still have lingering trauma from that year. Story 34. In 2021, my wife was diagnosed with cancer, and I struggled to sleep regularly for almost 2 years due to anxiety. Story 35. Has to be 2020. My academics declined sharply, my first serious relationship ended, and I have been filling the mental and emotional void until today. I have never been the same since. Story 36. In 2017, my home and many others were destroyed by Hurricane Maria, the worst hurricane of my life. I spent around 2 months without electricity. The year of COVID-19 was also difficult because an earthquake destroyed some homes. I was fortunate that none of these events affected my family or our houses. Story 37. In 2018, my dad passed away. He was a cautious and healthy individual. Life has changed since then. In 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic contributed to me adopting bad habits such as procrastination and hindering my social skills. Perhaps I should take responsibility for that. Story 38. In 2016, a girl broke up with me, and I became very depressed. In 2024, my family discovered that my dad was hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, and everything we knew was a lie. Story 39. In 2024, I had emergency surgery on January 4th for appendicitis. 9 days later, my mother suddenly and unexpectedly passed away. My left knee was in constant pain due to a lack of cartilage, causing the bones to rub and build up arthritis. I spent months sorting out my mother's estate, and my knee reached a point where I needed a full knee replacement in May. About a month after surgery, due to all the medications I was on and the stress, my stomach developed ulcers and started bleeding. I almost passed out one day while bending down to pick something up. I went to the emergency room for an endoscopy, and they cauterized the bleeding. By that point, I had undergone 3 surgeries and was not even halfway through the year. The rest of the year was spent recovering while still working, handling my mother's estate, and dealing with some other minor health issues along the way. 2024 was a challenging year. Story 40. In 2000, I was 13 years old. My parents went through a crisis that led to their divorce, and my paternal grandfather passed away. I was constantly in conflicts with a classmate, and my father began to behave oddly. Story 41. In 2019, I lost my 2-story, 2-bedroom apartment in Plateau, Montreal, which cost $750 a month, due to a neighbor's negligent barbecue on the shared deck. Shortly after, I lost a front tooth in an accident. Then, I developed severe appendicitis and almost died. If you've experienced intense fever, I had fever nightmares and constant pain. I was in the hospital for 8 days. That year was very challenging. Story 42. In 2011, at 19 years old, I was finishing college and had been accepted into the university of my choice. On the bus ride home on the last day of college, I experienced a severe hay fever attack which resulted in a hernia in my groin. I was in shock and pain like I had never felt before. I had 2 stops until I reached home, and I hurried back. My dad took one look at me and knew something serious had happened, so he took me straight to the hospital. Upon arriving at the emergency department, I was rushed through as my condition was extremely urgent. The hernia was the size of a tennis ball in my groin. The nurse attempted to push it back, but it had ballooned, and I was screaming in agony. I had to wait over 24 hours for emergency surgery, which should have occurred within 6 hours. After the operation, I remained in a ward but immediately felt unwell. I explained this to the doctors, surgeons, and nurses, all of whom brushed it off as normal post-operative sensations. I stopped eating and drinking, and my stomach began to bloat as if I were pregnant, and my skin started to turn gray. It took a serious mental episode where I demanded to go home for a junior doctor to listen and realize that something was not right. I woke up 2 weeks later with tubes everywhere, an oxygen mask over my face, and restrained to a bed with a large machine above me in intensive care. Turned out that I had been correct. During the surgery to repair the hernia, which had strangulated and bled due to the 24-hour wait, the surgeon accidentally cut my intestine and failed to check. I experienced internal organ failure of all my organs due to an infection and sepsis in my body. The sheet covering me had to be left open, and a vacuum machine was placed on me to help rebuild the tissue, which took a year. I remained in the hospital for months while a temporary machine was found and funded by my general practitioner when he discovered what had occurred. That year was a nightmare during which I delayed my plans for university while my friends moved on with their lives. I was connected to a machine 24 hours a day for a year until the scar fully formed. The scar on my stomach is now an enlarged star-shaped mark where the muscle has split and is missing. I was offered surgery to repair 50% of the muscle, but complications related to my stomach and all my internal organs gave me only a 50% chance of surviving the surgery. I declined and began picking up the pieces of my life from that point onward. I still have this painful wound, which I hate to look at, and it continues to affect me to this day. That year, that experience, and those memories from the hospital will haunt me until the day I die. Story 43. At the end of 2020 and into 2021, I had a narcissistic fiancé who was chronically unemployed. I had to wait for him to get a job in a different city to end our relationship and get him out of my house. This occurred over Christmas, which negatively impacted the holiday that year. After he left, I had to file for bankruptcy. The aftermath was significant, and I relied on my beloved dog to help me get out of bed each day and remind me to take care of myself. Unfortunately, I later discovered that my dog had cancer, and despite 3 surgeries, he passed away 3 months later. Subsequently, I lost my job because I was struggling to cope and was late to work due to a forest fire 1.5 kilometers from my home. Story 44. My first and last year of teaching was challenging. Every day felt like a struggle. I often felt like I was singing songs of despair. Additionally, I gained insight into the new generation, which raised concerns about their future as adults in America. Story 45. I had a difficult decade. My father passed away. I struggled to find a job. I was diagnosed with cancer and spent 6 months undergoing chemotherapy. My sister-in-law also died. My home was burglarized, and I was hit by a stolen car. That was the 1980s. I never want to relive that decade. In fact, I shouldn't have typed that out. I can feel it all washing over me again. Story 46. I can't pinpoint the exact year, probably around 2003. I was at my lowest, had fallen out with my dad, had no work, and ended up living with my sister who tried to get me to use drugs. It was a difficult time. Story 47. In 2005, Hurricane Katrina caused me to lose everything I owned, except for the items in my overnight bag. I left my home on Sunday morning, expecting to return the following Monday at the latest. I did return 1 week later to find my house flooded to the ceiling, with 15 pine trees having punctured the roof. I was officially homeless with my 2 children. Story 48. half of 24 inches and this half of 25 inches. Spine surgery has led to financial difficulties. My girlfriend left me after 5 years, and I haven't been working on myself for 3 months after the surgery. The company I have been working at for 5 years is most likely closing, which means I will likely be without a job in the next 2 days. That is all for now. Story 49. In 2017 and 2022, my mental health spiraled out of control. I said and did things I still have nightmares about to this day. I hurt people who just wanted to help, silently self-harmed, and was an awful person to be around. I love my friends dearly for sticking with me during those years. Story 50. In 2019, we had not financially recovered from my being out of work for 15 months, and then my wife spent most of the year unemployed. In the fall, my only brother died unexpectedly before we could make amends. I had already lost both my parents in the few years prior. It was challenging. Story 51. I had a toothache for several years that the doctors could not fix due to a bad crown and a bad root canal. I was also clenching my teeth at night because of stress, supporting 3 kids and a wife who wanted to become a personal trainer. My job in software sales was difficult, especially after joining a company with a poor product. During that time, my wife began flirting with other trainers and eventually asked me for a divorce. Despite everything, I survived, kept the house, got shared custody of the kids, and the startup was acquired. This year, I am excelling in sales and, surprisingly, my tooth no longer hurts. Story 52. The worst 12 months were from July 2023 to July 2024. During that time, my mom fell ill and passed away. I lost my career of 17 years, and my younger sister was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. She is still fighting bravely. I have since obtained a new job, which is less fulfilling, but I guess life is slightly moving in the right direction. Story 53. The year of confinement. Separated from my boyfriend, I was forced to cohabit with him. He was violent, completely unstable, a hypochondriac, and frustrated at not being able to be with his colleague at work. It ended with the police. They detained him for 24 hours to calm him down. Story 54. In 2022, I lost my mother to COVID-19. I know it's not as serious as before, but it's strange how we all act like COVID-19 never happened. She was a Khmer Rouge survivor and carried 5 children on her back. She deserved better. 3 years later, although I may not show it around my family, I still feel broken. Story 55. 2025 is approaching quickly, but it's hard to predict what will happen. A family member took their own life in January. Our beloved dog passed away, and my wife and I were deeply betrayed by an ex-best friend who then vanished. I was injured at work in December, and my employer laid me off due to my injury, leaving me in significant pain and struggling to find a job in a physically demanding field. The world seems to be on the verge of a major conflict, and it's only April. On the bright side, this is my first year of marriage, and my wife is amazing. I'm also creating a lot of great music with friends. There are silver linings to everything, but it feels overwhelming at times. I miss when my life felt uneventful and boring. Story 56. This one, hands down, takes the top spot, and it hasn't even finished yet. Exactly 2 weeks into 2025, my son died suddenly, and I have been living in absolute despair ever since. I have never felt anything like this before. I fear it will only get worse from here on out. Story 57. September 1967 to September 1968. Drafted to serve as a United States Army infantryman in Vietnam at 19 years old. Story 58. The year my dad's business went bankrupt, I was just in college and my next sibling was in grade school. We had to fend for ourselves. We lost our home and had to rent a small 2-bedroom apartment. We lost one of our cars, the newer one, but kept the other to drive around looking for work. Took us 3 years to recover. I accepted that we would be like that. My brother had to give up school while I finished college while working. However, things worked out well. I stayed with my parents and helped with the rent and bills while my sibling finished school, and then it was my brother's turn to help out. 15 years later, we have our own separate houses and cars. I guess the lesson is to never give up. Story 59. This one. But I thought the same thing last year and the year before. Story 60. Divorcing a mentally ill, alcoholic, drug-addicted wife who hasn't held a stable job since 2012. During this time, she would constantly text me, saying things like, "You need to send me money since you're working," and, "Well, that didn't take you long to start dating again." To this day, she still buys burner phones or creates fake social media accounts to harass my family and fiancé. Story 61. Last year, I discovered that someone I knew and admired in my teens was a grooming predator. My heart was broken for the first time. I was ghosted by the next girl I dated. Additionally, my mother's boyfriend passed away. He was a great guy, but his sisters are horrible narcissists. Story 62. 2019 was my worst year. I went through a tough breakup and gained a significant amount of weight back. This led to 2020, one of my best years. I discovered the effects of cannabis and alcohol on the human body. Now, fast forward to 2025. I'm about to be promoted to the rank of E4 in the military. I have a wife and a new home. I moved states and a lot has happened. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.